I guess what we're going to do is transition over to John here. You've been chiming in from here to there.
Yeah, we got a lot of discussion. I'm gonna give you a nice little segue to slide into the internet weather with this one.
Okay.
The Talos group, actually in cooperation with Cisco, I guess Talos might be...
Talos is actually a group within Cisco.
Oh, is it? It's like their research arm or whatever,
Exactly,
security research arm. They put out this report up on Cisco's blog. Interesting report about a group that they call SSHPsychos, also Group 93, I think. Basically, the group is out there scanning the internet very aggressively for SSH servers that are listening. And then once they find them, they brute force they attempt to brute force their way in. They have a password list of about 300,000 or so passwords that they'll try to brute force on each target that they're able to identify. They've been tracking this one for a while. I mean, we talk about, SSH scanning and all other types of scanning that we see in the internet weather. So I'm sure some of this is mixed in with all of that activity we see. What their report is kind of identifying is that there's really two primary address blocks. It used to be just one, which we have up on the screen in this chart here. And at some point, right before they were about to do some kind of takedown operations for their own mitigation operations, I should say, they actually switched to another one. Another address block, but all of the scanning activity has been primarily sourced from those two address blocks. So they scan from there, they do their brute forcing from there. Once they get into a machine, we've seen this kind of stuff before as well. A lot of the IoT stuff actually works like this, where they'll brute force their way into the SSH on these little home routers and whatnot. But once they get in there, they download a DDoS rootkit onto the machine, which then goes and reaches back to a command and control, which retrieves an XOR encoded config file, and they decoded one of those and showed it in this report. I recommend that you read the report. It's kind of interesting. Contains a list of IPs to deny, to not allow to talk to this device anymore, which is an interesting list of IPs when you go look at it. People they don't want to get in to this device that they've just compromised. I won't comment. And it also lists a bunch of file names that it should go look for and delete, which if you look at those also looks like it might be cleaning up in case somebody else had already compromised this device and dropped other malware on this machine. So it's whoever they are, they seem to know some of these other tool sets that are in play, and they go look for them and try to remove them so that they own this device, in as much of entirety as possible. Cisco kind of worked with Level 3, one of the larger ISPs out there. Level 3 actually initiated some activity to black hole these two address blocks within their own network to help protect any of their customers that might be on there from getting scanned and brute forced into. Interesting chart that I pulled together here. So this shows those two address blocks that they're scanning from, the attackers, and their report, the first bubble here on the left-hand side, talks about that their report says they're kind of certain that this activity might have started back into the June 2014 timeframe. If that's true, there's some other address blocks they were originating that scanning from. It doesn't show up in our report. But somewhere in the November timeframe here, this is a 180-day chart. I looked back all the way for a year and there was nothing, so I just kind of abbreviated here. But somewhere in the November timeframe, we see that first address block coming into play. And in the report, they mentioned that on March 30th that they pivoted to that new address block, and that's represented in the blue here. Kind of interesting, though, that we actually saw the activity maybe, 4 or 5 days prior to the March 30th there. From this new address block, so I think there was more of an overlap transition as opposed to a cut and go to the new one in one phase there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that that first IP block, when I did my last update on what we were seeing in the Kippo honeypots, 9 of the top 10 addresses that were scanning our honeypot were from that first net block.
Interesting, yeah.
So yeah, we definitely saw some of this.
So I guess the long and short of it, interesting that they did some black hole routing to try to protect themselves. But again, and we talked about this a lot in other cases, this is kind of a whack-a-mole kind of approach. It'd be nicer to try to figure out who the actors are behind it, work with law enforcement to get them so that they cannot continue their operation. However, doing something is better than nothing in a lot of cases, especially when you could do something that's going to have a large positive effect. Blocking blocks of address blocks is going to really hinder that actor set because now they need to go to a whole different location. Blocking IPs at a time is not really effective. That's really whack-a-mole. But anyway.
Yeah, well, that becomes one of the challenges here. And even you got to wonder to what extent they're really dependent on address blocks for what they're doing.
Right.
I mean, they could just move into a bunch of different cloud devices which have different addresses and would be much harder to track in the same context that's being done here. So I think that's I think your point is valid. Blocking addresses really is not the solution to botnets. We've learned that through many years of experience. So.
Yeah.